listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello, and welcome to this June 25th edition of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. John Williams will tell us more about today's guest, Rissa August.
Today on Stories from Real Life with Melvin E. Edwards. Rissa August was a triathlete until discovering she had a brain tumor that affected her motor skills. After surgery to remove the tumor, she dealt with her setbacks by riding her bike. Then, she rode her bike from Canada to Mexico, and last month, she rode across Spain. Though her brain tumor, who she calls Bubba, has returned and has presented a new set of challenges, she remains resilient and optimistic. Listen to this episode and feel inspired to do something you've never done before or thought you couldn't do again.
Thank you, John, for that introduction. Rissa August, welcome to the show.
Oh, I am so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me, Melvin.
I'm looking forward to hearing your story. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So you recently completed your latest bike ride, and this time you were in Brazil. So tell me what that was like for you.
Yes, I was actually in Spain.
In Spain? Okay, well, that's not Brazil at all.
And I was actually biking across northern Spain and the Camino de Santiago, which is roughly 500 miles. And it was this soul journey that I wanted to do for so long. And man, oh man, did it present challenge after challenge after challenge. I can laugh now, but there were absolutely some very difficult moments along the way.
Tell me about a couple of them.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'll tell you about the first day. I'm in this remote part of the trail, and it was very gnarly and muddy, and there's rocks and roots, and it turned into very scary mountain biking and not quite the flat, beautiful lavender fields I was envisioning. And I stopped along the way to kind of shed a layer. It was getting warm, take a couple photos. And then I headed back. I had to go up, do a very, very steep climb, and then head down into the next town. And I stopped again several miles down the road, and I couldn't find my phone. And I realized, like, our phones are lifelines now. Like, it had my maps on it. It had my lodging information on it. It had all my contact phone numbers in it. And I had no idea where it was. Well, like, think, Rissa, think. And I was pretty sure I dropped it at that stopping point where I shed a layer. But because of my circumstances with my diagnosis and everything, I couldn't even fathom. I just couldn't even imagine climbing back up the mountain, down the other side, looking for my phone, and then having to go back up the mountain and over it again and down the other side again. And so I found some fellas that helped me make a phone call, and that phone call proved extremely unhelpful. And there I was, like, what? And I'm sure there was a cuss word involved, but I was just like, what do I do now? I had no idea. I felt more lost than ever. I mean, I didn't even have my maps to, my mapping system. So I started asking other hikers. I was actually on my bike, but I started asking hikers who were coming off the trail. I was like, hey, did you find a phone? Did you find a phone? And I was making a big sign that I was going to say, hey, I'm going to be in this town tonight. If you find a phone, get in touch with me. And about 20 minutes later, this fella from, I believe, South Africa comes strolling in out of the woods, and I asked him the same question. Hey, did you find a phone? And I expected another no. And he said, yes, I did. And at first I wanted to be like, are you messing with me? Don't you mess with me. And I said, did you really find a phone? And he said, yes. And he said, and I had a feeling I was going to find you here. And he had my phone. And so I ended up walking my bike a good part of the way. And he and I talked for quite a while. And it was just one of those miracles that they talk about that happens on the Camino. And that truly felt like a miracle.
That's awesome. I'm glad you found it. So you were an advanced you were an advanced athlete from way back. But what makes your story truly unique is that you were diagnosed with a brain tumor. First, how are you feeling today? And then second, how did the diagnosis change your life?
Oh my goodness. In this moment today, I'm actually very low energy today, but I've had a string of really good days. So, hey, if it's just today, I'll take it. And how did and sorry, what was the second question? How did
the brain tumor change your life?
Oh my goodness.
Especially as it relates to you being an athlete.
Yeah. So before diagnosis, I really loved kind of intense activities. So mountain climbing, Ironman triathlons, and even like long endurance bike rides, and 90-minute hot yoga, like anything intense and hard. I seem to like it. and I was pretty good at it. I was really driven. I was really into CrossFit and extremely strong. One of the strongest women in my gym. And yes. And then I had just completed another Ironman in Colorado, and I couldn't recover. I was struggling to get off the couch, and I started looking at like HPA axis, which are glands in our bodies, and adrenal fatigue and all these things. And I started having really severe headaches. And so I was barely sleeping like 2 hours a night, maybe. And I would sleep kind of propped up, thinking that maybe that would help in some way. And so I was like leaning against the wall on a pillow and propped up in bed, and nothing was working. And so I kept going back to the doctor. And I just want to give a little backstory here. I started noticing some weird things happening in my body about 7 or 8 years earlier. But it got to this point where things became unbearable. And, I gained 40 pounds despite being an athlete and eating very stringently. And, and that's just, that's and the headaches, and those are only a few of the things. But, I kept being dismissed. And I finally demanded an MRI. And they found a massive tumor crammed between my eyeballs in the cavity that houses the pituitary gland. And I remember thinking, they were like, okay, you have to have brain surgery, and hopefully we'll get all of it. Oh, and it's causing a rare disease that destroys your body over time.
Wow.
Okay.
That's a lot of news at once.
Right. Yes. And I had this mindset of, okay, well, let's just do what we need to do so I can get on with my life. I have a lot of overachieving to get done, and because I was a neurotic overachiever, and I was just like, let's just get this done. And well, it wasn't that simple. They couldn't get the entire tumor out. I proceeded with radiation treatment. And at this point, the radiation treatment is still not working. And I'm on my 5th medication to try to control the disease from essentially destroying my body any further. And I quickly learned there'd be no more Ironman triathlons, probably no more backpacking, nothing super rigorous on the joints, because what the disease does, it grows your bones, it grows your tissues. So all my joints have changed. Every single joint in your body, your fingers, your knees, your hips, your jaw, everything changes. And so joints don't fit together the same way they used to. It becomes very painful. And then you're, what's the word I'm looking for? At risk of other kind of body changing diseases and disorders. And so yeah, I quickly learned I would no longer be the athlete I was. And also the brain surgery and radiation treatment changed a lot of my memory and cognitive skills and abilities. And I used to be an extremely successful wedding and event planner because I was so detail oriented and very organized, and everything changed, not just the physicality of it, but the emotions, the mentality, everything changed.
Wow. So you mentioned you weren't able to compete in triathlons any more after that. But how come you were still able to ride the bike? It seems like this would have affected your equilibrium, which is pretty important for bike riding, especially at a distance.
Yes. And so it's interesting you say that. I do sometimes have some balance issues, but I remember a doctor telling me, well, you should swim. You can swim. No weight bearing activities, like no more CrossFit and weightlifting, and you shouldn't even really bike. And I definitely, you shouldn't ride your bike from Canada to Mexico, which I'll get to that. And I saw that as, in my mind, I was like, well, challenge accepted, because I don't remember giving you permission or to tell me how I can and can't move forward, or how I should and shouldn't move forward. I appreciate your educated suggestion, but I get to determine how I move forward based on how I feel and who I know, how I know, or what I know I'm capable of. And
okay, so that leads me directly into the question about your bike ride from Canada to Mexico. So you rode 1,845 miles. Why?
I like how you say, why? Why would you do that?
Yes, that's exactly what I meant for you to get from it. So following radiation treatment, learning that they couldn't get the entire tumor, and following radiation treatment, and 6-7 months of being on the couch in these tattered gray sweatpants, barely able to function, couldn't even walk the dog or go grocery shopping. And I remember thinking, I don't want to live my life this way. I want to live. I feel like if I sit here
I'll die. And I don't mean that in an over dramatic way. Like, this was my mindset of I can't imagine existing this way. And so I started thinking about all of the things I wanted to do in my life, all the things I wanted to try, and all the things that were on my bucket list. And I've always wanted to ride my bike from coast to coast. And I thought, wow, what better way to heal my soul and to prove everyone wrong. But I can still bike. I can't run anymore, and I can't backpack or hike very far or even walk very far without a lot of pain, but I can still bike with minimal pain.
Wow.
And so I started looking at coast to coast routes. I didn't like any of them. And then I found the Pacific Coast route from Canada to Mexico. And I said, that's the one. And I didn't even hesitate. I was like, this is what I'm doing. And I'm doing it I try to convince myself I was doing it for me, but I think it was a little bit of both. For proving myself to the world.
All right, so you wrote a book about that chronicled your long road to self-discovery and physical wholeness, and your book is called "The Road Unpaved: Border to Border with a Brain Tumor and a Bike." So, did you feel like the book was exposing yourself to strangers or inspiring people who would never meet you? To be honest, I was in knots before the book's release date. My stomach was in knots. And again, it was one of those things I have wanted to do actually for decades, was write a book. And this was the time, this was the story, and this was the time. And I had no idea how it would be received. I wasn't even sure anyone would read it, And then all of a sudden, people started telling me how inspired they are, how it prompted them or motivated them to move forward in their life in some way, or some of the things, the awarenesses they got from it or things they took away from it. And I was blown away. I actually bawled my eyes out the first time someone told me some of the amazing things they got out of it. And so I had no idea it would be the success it's been so far. It's actually already won 4 awards, and it's being received really well. And I'm still getting used to calling myself an author and trusting that it's a good story, but I'm owning it more and more every day. It's my story, and I love it. And it really depicts who I am as a person. That's awesome. And it's so inspiring for whether or not somebody's got a brain tumor, just overcoming challenges. And is that your motivation?
Yes, that was my goal. It's, I had to really shift my perspective on a lot of things. I had to stop focusing on who I no longer was and start focusing on, okay, well, who do I want to be? Who am I now? I even feel emotional saying that. And so I started, okay, I can no longer do an Ironman, but instead of focusing on that, so I started focusing on, well, what can I do? Well, I can still ride my bike. And I actually took up painting, and I started, I gained inspiration from Native American talking stick, and I started painting these pieces of art and giving them as gifts, and now I sell them worldwide. And that was actually a healing process for me during those couch days and those tattered gray sweatpants, because it was an outlet for me and a mindfulness practice. And it was all because I asked myself, well, what can I do? Okay, well, I'm not ready to get on my bike yet, and I can't walk the dog yet, but I can paint. I can tap into my creativity and paint. And so it really became a matter of shifting perspective. And that's what the book became about, is helping other people kind of remove their limiting beliefs and shift their perspective so that they can move forward in a different way.
That's pretty awesome. So how do you think you would have dealt with your diagnosis if you didn't have your bike?
I don't know. I probably would have swam the English Channel or something. I don't know. I would have found a way, gosh, no one's asked me that question. I have found ways to fill my life. Like I said, I started taking dance classes and art classes and improv, and I've tried all kinds of things like indoor skydiving and boxing and axe throwing. And I've tried an aerial silks class at a circus school, so I've started filling my time with things that just I have a curious nature about me. So I just started, oh my gosh, that sounds fun, I want to try that. Or and I love to learn. So I suppose it would be through things like that. Learning. I love learning about myself. I love learning about other people. I love the art of story. I love hearing other people's story, like this platform you've built for people to share their stories. And I probably would do more writing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. It's interesting you mentioned aerial silks. And my 8-year-old granddaughter started an aerial silks class this spring. And she's only gone to maybe 3 classes because she joined right at the end of the term before the summer break. And she was a natural at it. Like, she climbed to the ceiling her first try. And this other kid said, I've been here for 2 years. How come she can do it and she's only been here for 5 minutes?
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Oh, my God.
So we'll see. We'll see how that goes in the fall when she resumes.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yes, it is pretty awesome. So how many countries have you ridden in so far, and how many more do you plan to visit, whether or not it's involving your bike?
Oh, gosh. Well, I've traveled to over 27 countries, but as far as riding my bike, I've ridden my bike all over the U.S. I can't even count how many states, but I've only ridden my bike in Spain. I've only actually ridden my bike in Spain, but I've traveled to a lot of countries. But now that I did a trip to Peru a couple years ago to up and over the Salcantay Pass and Machu Picchu, and that was extremely painful experience because it was trekking. And so I don't know that there will be a lot of that anymore, but I am starting to look at more bike rides and bike routes in Europe. So to be continued on that question.
So how did you get your bike to Spain? Was it a challenge?
I actually rented a bike there. Okay. I decided not to ship my bike. And I found a company that I was very specific on the type of bike I wanted. And they came through for me, and it was awesome. And I named the bike Focus, which was actually the name of the bike. But and in my book, my bike is named Moxie. For grit and determination. But yeah, so I actually rented a bike, and that was a whole nother story. We couldn't find the bike when I first arrived. So I was going to tell you that story too, but I told you the phone story. So that was an interesting experience as well, but that ended up working out. So.
All right. So you just mentioned Focus and Moxie. Tell us about Bubba. Who's Bubba?
So Bubba is my tumor, and I was talking to my mentor one day, and I was just very frustrated and like, oh my gosh, and I can't believe I can't do this anymore. And I've always been so healthy and very aware and in tune with my body. And now I feel like it's failing me. It's letting me down. And she said, well, what if you worked in agreement with your body? Like, what if you spoke nicely to your body? And what if you named your tumor? And instead of, cursing at it or, you just help the tumor move along into retirement. You served your purpose. I no longer need you. It's time to move into retirement. And so I was trying to come up with all these really cool and interesting names, like, like I mentioned in my book, Shaka Khan, and like or like Rocky, or but no, Bubba is what stuck, because what came to mind was this big, goofy, oafish voice. And I was like, oh my gosh, he sounds like Bubba. He just sounds like Bubba. So Bubba and I have dialogue throughout my story, throughout my book, and he's quite a character.
So when does Bubba exit the stage here?
So Bubba, so he and I supposedly had an agreement that he would go into retirement as of brain surgery, but 3 months later, when we discovered there's some residual Bubba that is inoperable. He decided he was going to come out of retirement and work part-time. Actually, though, he shows up more full-time. And so at this point, he'll be with me for life. Lucky me.
Wow. How did you react to that?
I was disappointed at first. My neurosurgeon really felt good about the surgery and thought they had got it all. But what commonly happens is, because these tumors are difficult to diagnose, they grow and grow and grow over time. I've probably had mine for over a decade. But they're very difficult to diagnose. And so what they do is they start growing into this area called the cavernous sinus. And that's what houses the carotid artery. So mine had grown into the cavernous sinus and wrapped around the carotid artery. And so at that point, they're like, whoa, we're not going to touch that. And oftentimes they also the tumors get very close to the optic nerve, and they won't go near the tumor if it's too close to the optic nerve. And in which case, it happened, both of those happened for me. So, so he's with me for the rest of my days.
Go away, bub.
Yes, he can be pretty annoying. Yep.
Yes, we don't like Bubba here. No, we're anti-Bubba. So you're a patient advocate for others. So tell me what that means to you.
Yes. So I remember thinking there wasn't a lot of information out there about these pituitary tumors and the disease I have associated with it. And I'm a researcher. I want all the details. I want to know, what can I do? I'm very action oriented, very motivated and driven. So I'm like, the more knowledge and information I have, the better. And I was hardly finding anything out there. And I'm like, man, if I feel this way, I wonder how other people feel. Furthermore, if it took over a decade to find my tumor, and also because I had to advocate for myself, I had to demand an MRI. I kept being dismissed about it. If I'm having this experience, there's got to be other patients out there, other people out there having the same. And so I just got to work. I started finding out everything I could. And I reached out to a really well-known neuroendocrinologist in California at UCSF. And I said, hey, I'm doing this bike ride. Will you share about this story and this disease, and so that I can spread the information out there? People need to get diagnosed earlier, and their doctors need to listen to them. And he said, well, one, I find it really interesting that you're doing this bike ride. And two, I know someone you need to talk to. Well, this neuroendocrinologist partnered with one of his patients who has the same disease I do. And they began this organization called Pituitary World News. And so I connected with Jorge, who was the patient of this doctor. And he basically, he's a wealth of knowledge, and he built this platform that is constantly trying to get information out to people with pituitary tumors, because it's it's believed that these are more common than it's being diagnosed. But because they're so difficult to diagnose, a lot of people don't find them till they've already done a lot of damage. And so he basically showed me the ropes and really helped me become this driving force of like using my story to get the information out there. And I'm forever grateful to him. And so I have people who reach out to me all over the world, asking me questions and are feeling inspired. And wow, if you can do it, I can. And I'm sure they're hearing the same things like, well, you shouldn't, and well, you have this now. And instead of identifying with that, create your own identity, create who you are. Yeah, I have this thing, and I'm a lot more than this thing. And so yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
So how frustrating was it for you and other people you come in contact with whose doctors, not necessarily dismissive, but who don't find a clear diagnosis right away and are just willing to move on as if there's nothing physically wrong with you?
Yes, well, I actually was very angry at first because I started telling my doctor just under 8 years before my actual diagnosis. I started telling my doctor, there's something wrong in my body. I don't know what. I can't explain it. And I kept doing research and going back to thyroid, and she'd say, no, your blood work's fine. I demand more tests and kept getting dismissed. And so I was extremely angry at first. And even once they found the tumor, all she said was, you have an enlarged pituitary, go see an endocrinologist. I had no idea what that meant. And I was so angry at first. I wanted to send her a scathing letter. And my friend Jorge with Pituitary World News said, you know what? I understand that you're angry, but that's not going to change where you're at right now, where you're at in this moment. And he said, and we need to all work together to change this story. Because I started finding out how similar other people's stories were to mine. And he's like, so we need to work with them. We need to work with the medical field to change the story. And that shifted my perspective. And so I did my own healing work around the anger and let that go, and started reaching out to people through my story, through my bike ride, and who I am as a person. So
did you ever reach out to that doctor again and let I think you said let her know what the real diagnosis was? Did you ever follow up?
I never did, but it doesn't mean I won't. I have thought about it. I ended up leaving her immediately as my doctor, and getting a new doctor. She was my primary care, and So I don't know, maybe someday I will, but no, I never did.
Okay. So when you're out there on those rides, what goes through your mind? Are you enjoying the scenery as you're passing through the mountains or the coastline? Or do you think other things that are unrelated to what you actually see in front of you?
It really depends on the moment. Sometimes it takes a very conscious effort to actually look around and enjoy the scenery, or even stopping to get off my bike and enjoy the view. Sometimes my focus needs to be on simply pedaling. Sometimes I'm in a mindfulness state where there's nothing in my brain except just one rotation after the other. And then sometimes it's just a matter of staying on the road, not getting driven off the road by a semi truck or something. So it's like a matter of safety and focusing on that.
So do you ride by yourself, or do you have some type of a caravan or some safety mechanism around you?
Yeah, so in Spain, I was completely on my own, solo. But for my ride down the Pacific coast, and a lot of the other rides I've done in the US, I tend to sign on with like a tour company. The ride down the Pacific coast was what's called a semi-supported tour. So 10 people shared a van, and the van transported our gear from campground to campground each day. So I didn't have to worry. I wanted my bike with me, which is a beautiful, lightweight road bike, and it's not at all set up for touring. And I really wanted to ride my bike. And so that was important to me to have that, which meant not carrying my gear. And so I hired this van, and I also thought it would be a good source of backup in case I had a medical emergency. And the van, the van support team made it very clear that we are not here to pick you up if you don't feel like riding, or you need to figure out how you're getting to the next town each day. And but there was some comfort in just knowing that I had that backup. And but I also learned quickly, oh my gosh, I have to get up and ride today if I want to have my gear and have a tent to sleep in.
So how long did this ride take?
This ride was 6 weeks or 41 days with 4 rest days.
That's a long time. That's a major commitment.
And in one hand, it felt like it went by quickly, and then in another way, it was a long time on the road. And the first 2 weeks were extremely rainy and cold. So that definitely felt like a very long time, long drawn out time.
Oh, glad you made it there safely. So what's the one message you want to give your audience?
Yes, I want to... When you're in, the message I want to give is when you're in those challenging moments where you feel like, oh my gosh, how do I possibly do this? Or if you're feeling like there's a block, ask yourself, well, what can I do? What am I capable and able to do now in this moment? And it can be one small step to get to that point, or to step outside of that block. You might not be able to go through it, but you can go around it or over it or under it. There might be another way. There might be another perspective, it's just a matter of shifting your mindset. And I remember having days where I had this 1,800-mile journey, bike ride ahead, but I had days where I was like, I can't get out of bed today. Well, what can I do? Well, I can brush my teeth. I'm going to get up and I'm going to brush my teeth. And so, and that eventually led to that 1,800-mile bike ride. So I want to remind you, don't focus on what you can't do. Focus on what you can do.
It seems small, but I'm sure every small victory can sort of be a reinforcement to get up and try again the next day.
Absolutely. And it leads to the next thing. Eventually, I was getting dressed. I was getting out of the tattered gray sweatpants and I was walking my dog. And then eventually I was on my bike riding 8 miles, so it'll lead to the next thing.
So you gave your brain tumor a name. Did you actually give those tattered gray sweatpants a name too?
No, but that's a good idea. But I think I'm pretty sure I burned them.
So I only have a couple of questions left. I want to come back to your book quickly. So first of all, tell people where they can find the book, and give me one more story from the book. You referenced something earlier that you had thought about telling me. Go ahead and share that.
Okay, sure. Well, my book, The Road Unpaved, Border to Border with a Brain Tumor and a Bike, you can find it on Amazon, or you can go to my website, Risa August, RISA, August, just like the month.com. And if you go to my book page, it gives you a whole bunch of other options for purchase. And another story that I love to share is one day I made everyone stop for donuts. And donuts I always saw as this like forbidden thing, this thing I should never eat donuts, and they're this bad thing. And but I'm riding 41 days in a row and I'm like, I'm going to eat a freaking donut. Okay. And so I make everyone stop for donuts, and everyone's like, no, I shouldn't. And I wanted to, eat healthier on this trip. And I said, well, do what you want. I'm going to have 2. And before I knew it, like 5 other cyclists come in behind me, and we're all getting donuts. And and the sun decided to peek through the clouds, and we're sitting in the park and we're eating our donuts, and everyone's just like, good idea, Risa. And it really became this metaphor of like, just eat the frickin' donut. It's just a donut. But we all get in our own way, and we think of all the reasons why we shouldn't do something, right? All the reasons we shouldn't do that thing. And I just got to the point like, just eat the frickin' donut. And now it's become a saying, a phrase.
That could be your next book. That should be the title of your next book.
It might be. It might be.
Well, I'm glad you shared that story. That's great. Now I feel like I want donuts.
They're so good.
Donuts are good. That's why I have to stay as far away from them as I can most of the time. All right. So I've got the last question I've got for you today. What's next for you?
Yes, gosh. Well, I have begun writing a second book, and I imagine it may be a continuation of this one. A lot of people have asked me, what happened? And my Spain bike ride could be a part of it. I'm not sure. It can evolve and go in many different directions. And as far as, I want to continue living a full and amazing big life, and whatever that means for me. And I think it's constantly changing. I imagine I'm going to plan another big trip soon and knock some more things off my bucket list. But that is the best answer I have at the moment.
Well, that's a pretty big goal. I think more of us should have those types of goals. So my guest this week has been author and world-class Wonder Woman, Risa August. So, Risa, thank you for being here today and sharing your stories. It's been a pleasure to have you here, and I wish you health and happiness going forward.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. What a joy. I appreciate you so much for having me.
Thank you. Let me know when you're going on your next bike ride. After you come back, maybe we'll talk to you again as a follow-up.
Absolutely. I would love to.
Okay. So that's it for this week's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.
That was Stories from Real Life. Join us again next week for another great storytelling journey. See you next time.